All right, everyone. Welcome back. It's been a while, but we are back for another class, another episode of Being a Fan of Disney, the podcast. And I'm joined by AJ Wolfe. She is the author of Disney Adults. A lot of people probably have heard about that over the last few months because the book is being very well received, which is really, really great. She is also the, correct me if I'm wrong, founder of Disney Food Blog as well, correct?
Yep.
So, so AJ is here to talk about her fandom, talk about Disney Food Blog, and then we'll also get into talking about what a Disney adult is and kind of, impressions of Disney adults that people have. So, AJ, thank you for joining us and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Great to be here, Cody. I appreciate it.
So, to start off, a good introduction or origin story. How did you get into Disney? From being introduced to Disney to through today, where you run a blog, the Disney Food Blog, and now you are a best-selling author of the book Disney Adults.
So I guess my first introduction to Disney, same as like most kids, Disney movies and stuff like that. When I really started to remember the concept of Disney is when I was a kid and my parents would take us to Disney World for vacation. But really, it was just like a one day thing. We would go every couple of years, we'd go stay at a beach in Florida, like in a condo for spring break, and they would bring us for one day to Disney World, like rope drop to fireworks. We'd get in the
Hmm.
car and when it was still dark and drive over to Disney World and stay all day and then drive back. Um, and so that was really kind of my first entree, I guess, into Disney parks. And I will say that, there's different kinds of Disney adults. There are some Disney adults who are, super into Disney music or Disney movies or Disney Broadway shows. And I'm a Disney parks adult. I really, really love the parks. And I'm not really hugely knowledgeable about some of the other elements of Disney, like I probably wouldn't win Disney movie trivia or, whatever, like, but I will win Disney parks trivia most likely.
So then, thanks for that, and let's go from there. What is so enticing about the parks to you on an individual level?
Well, and this is something that I kind of wanted to figure it out while I was writing the book is what makes us all such, I guess, for sometimes we're addicts to these hobbies that we love, and sometimes it just feels like something we can't get enough of. And
Hmm.
so I wanted to dig into that and why we feel that way and what makes us keep wanting to do this thing over and over again. For me and for a lot of the folks that I interviewed, it can be traced back to a family connection. Either you watched this movie or you went to a park or you experienced this Disney related thing with a family member, and it is the family member or the family circumstance that is the most important from a nostalgic perspective, that you remember that experience and you want to repeat that experience. So I used to go to Disney World, like someone would say I used to go to Disney World with my brother all the time, or my grandma used to take me to Magic Kingdom and I remember that. So it's always connected to a family member a little bit in some way for a lot of people. I shouldn't say always, but for a lot of people. So I think that's the case for me too, is that I really bonded with my dad over Disney parks. And so that was something that made me kind of really connect to the parks in a different way. So I think for a lot of us Disney adults, it isn't actually that we are enamored with the place itself or the location, but instead with how it makes us feel. And that's something I kind of put out in the book quite a bit is your hobby is your hobby, but what makes you love it is how it makes you feel, right? It's not, you don't love, you know, Magic Kingdom. You love how Magic Kingdom makes you feel.
Yeah. And And what's so great, and so everybody knows when I was contacting AJ and we were kind of communicating back and forth, I shared with AJ that I have studied fandom for probably 16, 17 years now, and across the spectrum with Disney, with sport, with music, with a lot of different things, it's that nostalgia factor, and it is the introduction to those interests by a family member or someone who is a close acquaintance. And it is, it does build on, I think when I think about myself going to Magic Kingdom, I went as a child with my mother, grandmother, and sister, and then one time we went as a big family. And I remember being in the parks and just being kind of amazed at everything that I was seeing. And so now when I go back, that's I still feel that whenever I walk into any of the parks, and especially when I walk into Magic Kingdom. The I feel that when I've now been lucky enough to go to Disneyland twice, and I have felt that when I've walked into there, even though I did not spend, I didn't go there as a child. So it definitely is those feelings or the memories that you have and the people that you spent that time with. I will always remember my grandmother sitting on the curbside for probably 2 hours saving us spots for the nighttime parades and everything. And so every time I'm walking through a park and I see families gathering around, I always think of that. Um,
Yeah.
so let's let's talk about something you started before the book. You started the Disney food blog. And when did you start the Disney food blog?
2009.
Okay. And so what was the emphasis for doing that for you?
So Disney Food Blog started because it didn't exist and I wanted it to exist. So nobody was talking about food at that level in Disney World. This was back before everyone had smartphones. I mean, Apple iPhones had been out for a couple of years, but not it wasn't something that was widespread. This was back before the majority of the social media platforms that you know now. Facebook had just come out of being college only. Twitter was just kind of getting started, and the web, blogs and websites were still figuring out what they were, right? I mean, that this was something that not a lot of people were doing. And so um when it came to Disney coverage, you had some of the big fan sites that covered everything, but then nobody was really niching down to food, and Disney didn't actually publish their menus or pictures of their food anywhere on their website. So there was really no way for anyone to get access to what they were going to be eating. And you had to book your restaurant 6 months in advance back then. It was 180 days. And I'm like, how in the world am I supposed to know what I want to spend like
Mhm.
hundreds and hundreds of dollars on if nobody's giving me any information? All I know is the name of the restaurant. I don't know what they serve. I don't know what the menu is. So that's what I wanted to offer for people is for them to be able to see with their eyeballs what they were going to get if they went to that restaurant and to have a little bit of an understanding of whether it would fit what their family was looking for.
hmm And so, that is something that I can relate to very, very well because still when I go, I find myself falling back on, going to the restaurants or the food that I have previously eaten. I don't really I'm not really trying a lot of new things. The exception is in a trip in 2019, I finally had a Dole Whip, and I had never had one before, and then have definitely made up for it since then because I've probably had 20 or 30 the last 4 or 5 times that I've gone. But it is really interesting that. There really was nothing out there. And so being able to provide that type of service to allow people to help plan their trips, because that is also part of the excitement, is planning the trip. Being able to plan where you're going to eat and what type of food that you're going to want, and then obviously dealing with, different dietary needs, different interests among family members, and especially if you're going with a large group. It is a service that's very much needed. And it's almost at this point now in 2025, it is almost unbelievable that it did not exist from early on. That it really didn't exist until you started in 2009. So great job for that, and thank you. Um,
You're welcome.
so what type of, in the Disney food blog, what type of work is needed to like, are you going and doing research? Are you having people that work for the blog going and doing research? Are people have, I guess, has someone at the blog eaten at every restaurant on a Disney property, or are you finding research from other areas as well?
No, we do it all. I personally have eaten at every restaurant on property multiple times. Several of my team members have eaten at every restaurant on property multiple times. We are constantly scanning menus to know when things change, when things update. Anytime there's something new, we go and we buy it. We make sure that our audience knows about it and has kind of our review of it, which isn't that it's good or bad. The review instead is, here's what it's like, to
Mhm.
help you understand if this makes sense for you. Because good or bad doesn't really exist in an objective way when it comes to Disney food. Everything's right for somebody. So we just give you the information that you need so that you can decide if it's right for you or not. But no, we've eaten everywhere multiple times. We continue. We have about 4 or 5 food reviews scheduled each week that our team goes and re-reviews the restaurant. So we're hitting close to, if not all, of the restaurants every year. But sometimes there are a few that are a little bit kind of outliers that we'll only go to once every, 18 months or something like
Mhm.
that. Um, but yeah, we cover it all, we eat it all. I've been everywhere. And that's a very, very important piece of what we do, because I think comprehensiveness is critical to us being able to give our audience the information that they need to make choices.
So, and does that include like Disney Springs and Downtown Disney, all of those restaurants and everything?
Absolutely.
Eh,
All the
Okay.
hotels, all the parks, the shopping districts, everywhere.
And like the like the quick service stand, or not quick service restaurants, but the stands in the parks, everything. Okay.
Everything.
So then this kind of gets into the questions of being an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
But first, to kind of ease into that, um, well, I guess the first question will be, how many people work with the Disney food blog?
We have about 50 people on our team across Disney Food Blog and allears.net right now. So that includes reporters in the parks, it includes writers, it includes people that maintain our products and our guidebooks that we create. It includes HR, it includes accounting, it includes video
Mhm.
editors, so it includes everybody who works for us at the moment.
How many taste testers, I guess, do you have working with the food blog?
Reporters, we usually have over in Disneyland, we have about 4. And in Disney World, we have probably 6 or 7.
Okay. Okay. And so from a business perspective, because this is a very, very popular site. It is a very, or popular sites. It's very popular resource and service that you provide. So I guess on a day-to-day basis, how many hours would you say that you spend kind of planning things out, um, go, putting together schedules for people, uh, from reporting to taste testing to editing, what all goes into what people see whenever they go to the site and they go to social media?
So again, we have 50 people. So some of those people are obviously in management
Mhm.
levels. And so they are, we have one person whose job it is to create the schedule every week. So she's figuring out, okay, what reporters are going to what parks, what restaurants, what hotels, what media events that we want to cover. So she's kind of figuring out where the reporters are going, who's working in terms of writers on each day, who's working in terms of editors on each day. So she's in charge of kind of that master calendar. But then we have, multiple other people are managing their own projects, whether that's marketing or whether that's, you know, somebody who's working on accounting and figuring out, what they need to do in terms of tax issues and things like that, right? So everybody's got their kind of own projects. So if you're asking what I personally am doing, how many hours I'm putting in every day, or are you talking about like the whole team?
Well, for first, how many hours are you putting in?
I'm working all the time. I mean, it is an entrepreneurial role, and it is in digital media, um, which is not a steady space,
Hmm.
right? If I was working in medieval church history, like that tends to stay pretty stable. Like
Yeah.
it's unless they have
Yeah.
a huge archaeological find, there's not going to be too much that changes with what you're kind of talking about. Um, and I say that because I studied medieval church history for a
Okay.
long time,
Okay.
so I feel I'm okay to say that. But when it comes to digital media, it is an absolutely volatile space. Everything is changing every time a new social media platform comes around. Every time you've got a new LLM coming online, and you've got something else that's affecting how the digital media space is working. It's just changing constantly to the point where it could, I tell my team very specifically, it's great if you develop an entire process around this particular project, but understand that in 3 weeks that process might be outdated
Yeah.
because of everything that's changing. So I kind of work all the time. I'm sort of the um, kind of overseeing all of my management team members in what they're doing. So I'm sort of there as a building and creating the next level of what we're doing. So projects that are coming down the pike, managing
Hmm.
relationships that are going to be the instigators of future projects, things like that. So my job right now is kind of um, building and expanding for the company, right? And a lot of relationship management as well. Whereas I'm less involved in the day to day scheduling or product
Hmm.
or project building. You know what I mean? So I'm more, if it gets to me, it's probably on fire. And so I have to, I'm spending most of my day putting out fires or helping my team handle um questions that they're not quite sure how to find answers to.
Yeah. And so, how much do you, on an individual level, uh, go into the parks or on properties?
I try to get to the parks every um at least once every couple of months, if not more. I see it as critical for me to also eat at every restaurant and
Hmm.
experience every new thing that comes down the pike. So even if my team has already done it and reviewed it, I think it's important for me to do it just from a quality control perspective. So I will go and experience everything as well, and then make kind of my judgment calls based on it, because I'm also, when I do my YouTube videos, I'm also ad libbing a little bit in there too. And so if there's something that I think is critical and important for my audience to know, a value add that I think is important, then I will, then I'm knowledgeable enough to make those judgment calls, or shift tack in
Yeah.
some areas where we may be saying XYZ, but that particular I guess opinion is starting to get a little outdated because things have changed, and so we need to rethink what our like what our favorite restaurants are this year or something like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm there every you lately I've been there like every other week.
Okay.
So it also depends on what's new and what's happening, because if there's something that I need to be there for, I'll be there.
Yeah. So then, kind of going back to it that started in 2009, when did it really like when did you realize you needed to start expanding the company and bringing more people on, and how did that kind of develop? And the reason I'm asking is a lot of people believe they want to be entrepreneurs, um, until you find out how difficult it is to be an entrepreneur. And then you are in a really cool space where, or situation where, um, what you did really grew to the point where now you have you have a team of 50 people, and you have multiple sites, and you are doing very, very well. I think as far as what everybody sees when they watch your videos, or they read reports, or they read on the blog, people are probably thinking, "Oh, this would be so much fun to do." And then you kind of realize the work that goes behind it. So when did you realize that this was something that was catching on, and you had to expand?
Well, I will say I have never been someone who wanted to be an entrepreneur. I am a very reluctant entrepreneur. I don't I don't do well with stress and uncertainty. So I am not your quintessential entrepreneur. So it's not anything I ever wanted to do. It's I am extremely duty bound, and I knew that this was something that needed to exist in order to help people out there who were spending way too much money on on food
Yeah.
that was bad in Disney World. And so that was kind of the motivator and driver for me, less about I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to build a company, and more about I want to help people have better trips and save money. And so this is the best way to do that right now using my personal skill sets. So I will say, launching it, I guess I sort of figured there wasn't going to be an option other than to expand,
Hmm.
because if my goal was to help as many people as I could, then I wanted to get it out to as many people as I could.
Hmm.
So probably within the first year and a half or so, we realized that it was uh, definitely popular. People, it was the right time for this concept to come out, and people were ready, and wanting something like this. And so probably in about, I mean, we started in 2009, probably by 2010 I had already brought on a couple of
Okay.
folks to help me um with writing, help me with guidebook creation, and stuff like that. So that's probably when I hired my first couple of part-time folks to help. And then I believe we bought allears.net in 2014, and that was the point when we needed to go, find office space and bring in, a good number of folks to really continue to thrive.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. And
Yeah.
so another thing that I think, and then we'll move on to Disney adults. Another thing I think people misunderstand, or don't know as much about, is when people see someone doing something, making videos, making content, whatever it may be, about Disney, and especially about in the parks. um, it's it oftentimes, and I do this as well, it's hard to see the kind of work and the stress behind it.
Mm.
And that, when you go into the parks, you have to go in with a plan, and it becomes very business-like, if you will. So how do you balance going to the parks or going anywhere on properties that for how do you balance the business side of it and then making sure that you as an individual on an individual level gets to kind of experience new things and enjoy those experiences as well.
Um, I guess probably, that's just kind of having. There's two ways to look at this. You could look at it and say, um, that you can put boundaries around it and say, okay, when I'm going in and I'm working, this is what I'm doing. And when I'm going in, say, with my family, or as just a fun vacation or something like that, that you have your certain boundaries, that I'm not going to check
Mhm.
emails, or I'm not going to take a bunch of photos of this food that I'm about to take. I'm just going to enjoy it. You know what I mean? Like, so there's those boundaries. But something that I will say about me, and this could be true about other creators, I guess. Um, None of those words existed when I started what I don't even know what to call myself, but is that I tend to be a very curious person, and I tend to be a detail observer. And so anywhere that I go in my life at all, I'm going to be scoping things out and looking for things that are interesting to me. And
Mhm.
this is I think the difference between someone who could do this for a living and someone who would be a little bit who would be exhausted by it.
Yeah.
Is if you're naturally curious in a way that you're going to look at almost everything you see and go, huh, I wonder why. What's going on there? And so even if I go to my hometown, like to see my mom, right, for like a holiday weekend, I've got a notes app open on my phone that if I see something that
Yeah.
interests me or intrigues me, like there's a cemetery near where she lives, and that's actually like it's huge, and there's a lot of like little roads through it, so it's where a lot of us kids grew up learning to ride our bikes and stuff,
Yeah.
was in this
Yeah.
cemetery, which is weird. But walking through that cemetery, I will see a particular gravestone or something, and it'll be a certain name and it'll be a certain date, and I'm like, oh, I wonder what happened in this town at that time. And I'll like put it on my little notes. I'm like, I want to look this up. I want to look this guy up or whatever. So that's just kind of how my brain works. And it would
Okay.
be incredibly boring to me to go through life not kind of recognizing those little mysteries that are all over the place. And so it's almost just as much fun for me to go into Disney World and scope that kind of stuff out
Hmm.
as it is to go in with my family and just ride rides. It's almost, when you've been there as many times as I have, it almost like it's not as fun anymore if you're just doing the same things over and
Yeah.
over again.
Yeah.
You have to approach them in a new way. And so that's another, that's something else that I'm very lucky that I have that mindset, that I'm just like, oh, that's weird. I wonder why they have, I wonder why those shutters are hanging in that way. I wonder what the Imagineers were thinking, or why they use that color or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's just how I approach everything I do. And I always have that notes app that I'm like, I want to figure this out. And in Disney World specifically, that notes app is always full of like, oh, this is a thing that I did that was stupid, and I don't want anyone else to do this. And so let me make sure to talk about this on my next video, that like, hey, don't be like me, don't make this bad choice. So there's lots of that stuff going on too, but that's just how I approach the world around me. Is I don't necessarily want to do the same things over and over again. I want
Okay.
to experience them differently, or have or be answering some different questions about it. So it's not as much. I don't need the boundaries as much as someone else might, because it's actually fun for me to go in and do work, because the work is fun.
Okay. And I would say that's very much the way that I am whenever I'm there as well. I like to, whether it's I like to feel like I'm doing something or I like to feel busy or what, I am always kind of trying to seek out those details as well. It's very much like the deep dive approach where, people will talk about how you can go to Disney and you can just look at everything that's there and you can ride the rides and you can appreciate that. If you want to dive a little bit deeper, you can dive a little bit deeper. And then if you want to go full on and get to the deepest details that exist as well. Which I think is something that is really, really good for a lot of fans, and I think is one of the things that keeps people going back, especially to the parks and being interested in the company. So that actually will kind of take us into Disney adults. And so, what was, where did the idea for this book come from first?
So it actually came from the publisher. The My editor at Simon and Schuster was a fan of my work and reached out to me and said, "Hey, I think that the the world is ready for a book about Disney adults because there's a lot of people who don't know what they are, and there's a lot of stereotypes and there's a lot of assumptions out there." And she's like, "I think someone should write this and I think you should write it." And so that's where it came from. In all honesty, I did not have a typical path to publishing. It was a situation where they approached me and said, "We think you would do a good job with this book." So I will say that it was definitely a challenge. This is a topic that a lot of people um, probably wouldn't be willing to kind of attack because it is such a controversial topic for a lot of folks. There's a lot of negativity around it. And so having to sort of, in order to do this book justice, you couldn't have written just a defense of Disney
Hmm.
adults and
Hmm.
just say, "Oh, Disney adults are great. You guys are stupid." Um, because stereotypes are there for a reason, and there are lots and lots of elements of this particular fandom that stem from um you know uh, potentially negative qualities that we have as hobbyists, and so there was a lot that needed to be researched, and there was a lot that needed to be handled carefully because this book was written for multiple audiences. Like, you needed to be able to pick up this book as a Disney adult and feel well represented and feel positive about your fandom, but you also needed to be able to pick up this book as someone who's like, these people are crazy, and still get something interesting out of it and get some sort of knowledge out of it that maybe you didn't know before. And so it had to be written for a lot of different audiences at the same
Hmm.
time, and so that in and of itself is a tall order.
Well, and there's someone who the man's name, the author's name is Nate Hibbing, and he actually writes about political discourse, but he has a really good book about kind of understanding where people come from with their beliefs or because of their backgrounds and things like that. And his whole thesis of the book, his whole idea is you don't have to agree with each other, but the more you understand about each other,
Right.
you do we do everybody still does have to exist, right? Everyone has to coexist and we have to co-inhabit uh, our society. And so the more you can understand about a group, you can leave the book or you can leave the project still not agreeing, still not fully understanding, but if you take a step toward understanding, then that at least is a positive. And so I think, and again, like I have spent a long time doing this type of research, and
Yeah.
so I want to say, listening to your book, I listened on Audible. I listen to books all the time.
I do
Um,
too. All
that
the time.
it's the uh, listening to it, you do a fantastic job of telling, I'm going to say telling both sides of the story because that's the easiest way to state it, I guess. But yes, writing it for various audiences. And what I was really impressed with throughout the book And then afterwards, when I reflected on it again, what I was really impressed with was what you just talked about, where as someone who, I am a Disney adult. I don't necessarily refer to myself as that because one, don't think it's really a negative thing. So I'm not embarrassed to say it. I don't know if like I'm that level of fandom where I deserve to be called that, I guess. But as someone who is an adult and really likes Disney, I did identify with a lot of things in the book.
Yeah.
As a social scientist who has studied fandom in sports and
Yeah.
in theme park fandom and in movie like different settings, I also was able to appreciate the way that you told that story as well. And so
Good,
I
because
I
that
just
I'm glad you appreciated that because it's you have a lot more knowledge about sports fandoms than I do. So I'm glad I hit that the right way.
well and the there are so many parallels between a Disney fan and a sports fan. And you mentioned it a few times in the book and even make some references to, you know, people who are making fun of someone for standing in line for a parade or for getting excited to see a character. Some of those people are the same people who are standing in line to get into a sporting event or are excited to see a person at a concert. They it's how people choose to spend uh the resources that people have and the discretionary income that people have. And you make a really good point of, there's because someone wants to visit a place that others may believe it's made for children, that doesn't make it wrong for those people to be able to do that. If that makes them happy, that is overall the goal.
Yeah,
Um,
and if they're not hurting themselves or anybody else, like I always put that caveat in there, like don't hurt yourself and don't hurt anybody else around you, and you're probably okay.
so that's very interesting because the whole purpose, kind of the through line that we talk about in being a fan of Disney, the class, from the beginning of the semester to the end, is I actually tell them if you are a fan of something, it can be Disney, it can be movies or musicals, it could be sports team, whatever it is, and it does not hurt you, so therefore you're not in a cult. That would be something that, people can't get out of on their own volition. If it doesn't hurt you and it doesn't hurt other people, like you're not doing something that is hurting other people and you are trying to hurt other people, if it doesn't fall into those categories, then you should be able to show that fandom because it ultimately makes you happier, which makes your interactions with others better. It essentially makes you a better, more productive member of society if you are able to enjoy the things that you want. So it is I when I heard that in the book, I kind of chuckled because it was like that is exactly what we talk about in the class. And we have that caveat. Like, if you are not hurting yourself or hurting someone else, then you should be able to display this fandom.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and I think also what something else that's critical about that is for a lot of us, the fandom that we have creates an entree into positive social interactions that we
mhm,
might not have otherwise, I'm super awkward and a weirdo, and I think that having this particular thing that I love and having this in common with other
mhm,
people, that gives me an opportunity to be comfortable interacting with those people and also find friendships and potentially even chosen family in those through those fandoms, which I think is ultimately the goal. I mean, we all as humans, what we're always looking for is community, above and beyond anything else. We are social animals and we have to have that. And so a big way that we find that right now, since we're not necessarily growing up in the same village as our whole family did, or we're not necessarily, because we're traveling so much, that these days your village tends to be your fandom, the thing
Hmm.
that you love, that you spend your extra money on, that you spend your extra time on. And so that's where your social circle ends up being, that's where your community ends up being.
Yeah. And forgive me if I forgive me if you did write about this. I can't remember it here. I can't remember when I listened to it. But it also that also goes into something called the extended contact hypothesis, where the more contact you have with someone,
Yeah,
the the more understanding you become of that person. And so the
of course.
idea is that if you have two people who are fans of Disney and they may not agree on other things, they at least can agree on that one thing. And that is kind of their way into coexisting, their
Mm-hmm.
way into, and possibly their way into better understanding each other, which is very, very important, just kind of for society in general. And you do a very good job of writing about that in the book. So, and now a message from Cody's Inner Dialogue. Hey, Cody. Yeah, what's up, Inner Dialogue? So, I've been reading the Prospectus Files. Oh, you've been reading it? You've been reading it, and I've been listening. Okay, yeah, that makes more sense. But I have some questions. Okay, we talked about some of the Easter eggs in the Prospectus Files, but what about some of the names in the Prospectus Files? Oh, yeah, some of the names are people who have been on Being a Fan of Disney, the podcast, several times. Some of the characters, such as Stan and Ryan P., Ryan B., Kate, Carissa, Ron. We get some really, really cool people to come on the show. And so I thought it would be really fun to include them in the book. Yeah, that's really cool. Here's my question, though. Okay. Where did you get the name Elliot? Oh, Elliot is actually a nod to the dragon in Pete's Dragon. Oh, okay, cool. And what about Jules Sulatan? Yeah, yeah, Jules Sulatan. So Jules Sulatan is a nod to Jules Verne and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, one of my favorite books of all time. And actually, Sulatan is Nautilus spelled backwards. Oh, really, really cool. Okay. And aren't you writing some short stories about these characters as well? Yeah, I am. So, actually, there is a short story that will be up on Shared Perspectives soon. And it's actually already been out as a podcast episode about Elliot and him playing baseball. And I'm actually writing one and finishing up one on Jules and her adventures in actually having something to do with writing of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. So it'll be really fun. Okay, so where can people get these books? Yes, thank you, Inner Dialogue. The Prospectus Files is available on Amazon in paperback, hardback, Kindle, and Audible versions. Please pick up a copy today. All right, everyone. Thank you, and now back to our show. So let's talk about the the research you had to do for this book.
Yeah.
We'll get to the interviews and next, but the amount of research you had to do, reading articles, reading number of books, number of academic, you interview a number of academics that actually I know and have been on this podcast before, so that was really exciting to hear their names. How many hours of research did you do for this book before conducting one interview?
I didn't really approach it that way, honestly. The way that I sort of approached it was I knew what I wanted in the book, and I knew enough because of all of the work that I'd done previously and being in this space I knew enough. Also, I have a degree in psychology, and so like
Hmm.
there's little elements there that sort of came through of okay, I know I want to talk about this particular concept or whatever. So as I was sort of putting together um the book pitch where I needed to know what my chapters were going to be and I kind of needed my first chapter and my last chapter. Um that's honestly how I approached it from an organizational perspective is I was like I want all of this stuff in it. I may not know the specific numbers that I want here. I may not know the um like for example, I knew I wanted to talk about the demographics of the people who go to Disney World, but I
Hmm.
didn't necessarily know those numbers. So I did do that research, but I knew enough already to know that I wanted that in there. So
Hmm.
I think that's more how I approached it. So it wasn't like me having to go and learn everything about plumbing when I'd never done any plumbing before.
Yeah.
It was me understanding the community and understanding the psychology of the community enough that I kind of knew the things that were going to be headliners and highlights in the book. So, not necessarily the answer you were probably expecting, but that is more how I approached it. So the research sort of came throughout,
Yeah.
right? Where it was like, okay, I know I'm working on chapter 4 today. These are the main concepts I want to talk about. So let me find kind of the supporting data for these things that I know to be true. But I need supporting data so that everybody who's reading it knows it to be true
Yeah.
too. So that's kind of how I approached it. And I would say I honestly started with the interviews more than anything
Okay.
else because that it was talking to Disney adults that sort of brought out maybe if there was anything that I hadn't already thought of, it came from them. It came from the
Hmm.
people I was talking to who were like, who would say something and I'd go, oh, well, that doesn't grok with what I was expecting you to say. And so then that suddenly became a new point that I needed to research and I needed to look into. So
Hmm.
it was from Disney adults that concepts came that if those hadn't been in the original idea of the book, it came from them. It didn't come from kind of other research I was doing. So mostly it was, the whole book is based around that community and what I learned from them as well.
So on that topic, um, did you, how often did you think something happens, or you thought something to be true,
Yeah.
and then actually through talking with people or doing the research, you
Uh-huh.
found out, oh, maybe it's doesn't exactly happen that way, or sometimes it's quite the opposite. How many times did that happen, you think?
Probably I would say probably 3 or 4 times, or probably 3 or 4 times that I had in my head sort of pre-written that that chapter or that concept and had to go and completely dismantle it
Hmm.
and rework. So yeah, probably 3 or 4 times. And it's one of those situations when I as a writer, I am someone who um I'm a really bad writer in that I like to write it once and I wanted to get it right the first time, which that's not how writing works. And so that's unfortunately that like that's my problem. And so it would make me really mad when I would be like, oh, my theory's wrong, I have
Yeah.
to go kind of rework everything and I'm like, forget it, I have my whole weekend's gone. um but yeah, I'd say 3 or 4 times. One of the most prominent, of course, that I talk about in a lot of my interviews is me thinking that Disney adults would be really frustrated with the treatment they got from friends and family
Hmm.
who didn't understand their fandom and would be like, "You're going to Disney again? I can't believe you're doing this. Why do you spend so much money on it?" And when I started asking Disney adults, and I was like, "Hey, it's pretty bad, isn't it? When all those people are mean to you because they don't understand it, right?" And they're like, not really." And I'm like, "Huh?" And they're like, "Nah, it doesn't. I don't really care what anybody else says." But you know what I really don't like is other Disney adults. And that threw me for a major loop. And I was like, what? And to the point that I actually almost dismissed it as like an aberration until I
Hmm.
heard it from more and more and more people unbidden, right? They're just like, yeah, other Disney adults kind of suck. And I was like, okay, wait, what? Like, how? And what eventually came out was that it's obvious for those of us who study fandoms and psychological communities, but it wasn't obvious to me at the time. Is like your community that you live in is the most important in terms of how they're judging you. Everybody around you who's not like you don't care what they say about you. Who
Hmm.
cares? Like that doesn't have any bearing on your confidence. But your community, your family, your friends, your like the the group within which you're hoping to gain hierarchy and
Yep.
status, them judging you or them being mean to you or criticizing you is incredibly difficult. And so I'm
Hmm.
like, well, of course that makes sense that you're not going to care about people who don't like Disney. They're going to care about people who do like Disney and who know Disney and who can judge them, for their prowess in this space. So it makes perfect sense now. But at the time I was like, wait, why do you not like other Disney adults? And then they started to explain it. I'm like, oh, I get it. Okay. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, that stinks when you got a bunch of people who are like, yeah, you don't matter. You can't sit with us because you don't have an annual pass, or you haven't ridden this ride, or you weren't super smart about this particular section of Disney history or something dumb like that, right? So that's 1,000% something that threw me for a loop, and I'm like, oh, this makes perfect sense, and now I understand it.
Yeah, and I think with any group, like your in group or the group that you are a member of,
Yeah,
if you are looked, if someone from your out group looks down upon you or tries to be derogatory toward you, it's it almost gets to a point where it's almost like a badge of honor for some people. Um,
right. Yeah,
but then it is like within certain groups there's like a hierarchy, and everybody exists in multiple groups. So you have your Disney fans, but then you have your theme park fans, and you have your movie fans, and your musical fans, and Disney Channel and books and things like this.
yeah,
And even within those theme parks, Disneyland versus Walt Disney World, or when and then it gets into like Disneyland churros versus Walt Disney World churros, and so it does. People create smaller and smaller groups, or in groups, if you will, to kind of uh, find who they are most like. And what happens with that is it can lead to a dangerous point where uh, you might find that you're a group of one eventually if you just keep narrowing it down. And so, what are some of the stories? Because I haven't experienced this so far with people that are just kind of mean toward other adults or other people that like Disney. What
yeah.
are some of the stories that you heard? You wrote about some of them, but can you tell us a story or two
Of people experiencing negativity from non-Disney fans or from Disney fans? From
from
non-Disney
Disney,
fans?
from both? One
From
like
both.
one from non-Disney, one from Disney.
Yeah. I mean, the non-Disney situation again is what I kind of mentioned before, where it's like your coworkers
Hmm.
who just cannot wrap their head around, well, didn't have you been to Disney World? Like that concept of not understanding why you would want to go again. Um, and especially why you would want to go to a place that's for kids. Like that doesn't make any, like, you don't have kids, why are you going there when you could go to Europe, or you could go, to New York City or whatever, and you could do this other stuff. So there's a negativity there. um there's also a negativity from internally, where again people are consistently fighting for status in their in group, in their community, and um, because they've maybe spent money or time or bandwidth or effort to gain that status, the thing that makes them feel like it was worth it is when they're able to berate other people who maybe haven't gained that status. So it's kind of like, bullies are always going to attack, smaller, weaker people, because that gives them somehow a defense of what they've done to get to where they
Hmm.
are. So I think that that kind of, whether that is, I've been to every park internationally, or I've stayed in every Disney World hotel, or I've, been to, I've ridden all the newest rides, or whatever. I got a ticket. It's often I got a ticket to this very exclusive event, stuff like that. And then the people who didn't, are sort of shunned. And I think that absolutely happens within the Disney community, and especially for people who, this is maybe their primary in group, their primary community
Hmm.
that they exist in, and that there isn't a lot of other stuff that they're interested in, or that they're putting their time and effort into. So I think there's that, but there's also an element of, in one of my chapters in the book, I attack the concept of why are people so mean about Disney adults? Like, why do they not like Disney adults? If Disney adults aren't hurting them in any way, why do they still need to be negative about this particular group? And so that section of the book looks a little bit more into, um I guess, psychology of hate, and
Hmm.
psychology of, dismissing people that you feel are the other,
Hmm.
or when you have an us and them mentality, it is the them, it is the people that are so different from you that you feel negativity towards them, whether that is based on socioeconomic circumstances, whether it's based on racial circumstances, sexual preference. There's a lot of elements in the Disney fandom community that coincide with marginalized communities. And so that's another thing that I really wanted to give some space to in the book, is that, a lot of people think they hate Disney adults because those people are weird, but they actually don't like Disney adults because they fit into a subgroup that maybe they are either jealous of or
Yeah.
feel, negative toward.
Yeah. Very true. Um, how many, so you did interview a lot of people. And I mentioned it was fun hearing you spoke to Robin Muir, you spoke to Dr. Robin Muir, sorry, Dr. Rebecca Rowe. They both I'm in the now I can't remember what the Disnet.
Yeah.
It's the academic group for Disney scholars, and they've both have been spoken in the class and on the podcast before, and so it was fun to hear them. And you spoke to a number of other academics, but you also spoke to a lot of fans. And I should point out also the academics are fans. That's, um,
Yeah.
they're ACA fans is a term I learned recently.
Yeah,
They're
me too.
how many how did you keep track of how many interviews you did for the book?
No, but I've got a lot of spreadsheets. I can go count them up. I will say that there were probably twice the amount that are in the book.
Yeah,
So I interviewed, a lot of folks that had to be cut from the book, or
yeah,
didn't get into the book. But what I wanted to stress to those people, and everyone reading the book, is that every single one of those interviews has made it into the book in the thought process of how
yes,
I ended up organizing it. And like I said, most of what I didn't start with automatically came because someone I was talking to mentioned something that made me go, oh, wait a minute, I'd like to dig into that a little bit more. And so, a lot of it came directly from the community, from people I was interviewing. And so I wish I'd had time to interview even more people, and get more. My editor eventually was like, you got to cut 40,000 words from this book,
yeah,
because there's just so many people I wanted to be in there. um that's my favorite part of the book, is chapter 3, where we were actually talking to fans, because I think that's one of the, like you said multiple times in this interview, the best way to understand somebody you don't understand is to be close to them and talk to them and ask them
Mhm.
questions and hear what they have to say. So I thought that was a very important part of the book.
Well, and it's also I want to make sure that I'm sure somebody has told you this before, but I want to I guess take my turn to say it. It's also important that for people reading the book, it feels very different when you read something and you see that you have contributed to it, or when you listen to something and you hear that you have contributed to it. And
Mm-hmm.
so that those types of kind of events help to bolster people's fandoms toward different things as well. Because I'm I'm sure, and I don't know if you've ever thought about this or allowed to yourself to think about this, but I'm sure there are a lot of people who are mentioned in the book, who they probably tell their friends and they probably tell their families, and that is a source of pride for them. And so
Yeah.
that is something also really, really cool that has come out of this book is you've given people that platform as well that they can feel good about themselves, but it also kind of elevates their fandom in different ways.
I think so. I think so. I will never forget when I was, gosh, I was probably like 22. I mean, 100 million years ago. And um, there was a magazine that I used to read and I wrote, they had a little section at the beginning where people who read the magazine could write in with a tip.
Hmm.
And I sent a tip and it got in the magazine. And it was just like, I'm going to go buy every single one of those
Yeah.
magazines I can possibly find, and I'm going to tell everybody that I was in this magazine. And absolutely, we respond that way. I mean, that's extremely exciting, and so that's probably another reason why I wanted as many people as I could get into this book
Yeah.
be in it, because again, it is this to me was a group effort to kind of bring our story as a
Yeah.
community forward in a way that people who don't understand us, don't like us, or are just curious about us can see the full story there. So to me it was 1,000%, those interviews and everybody on my Instagram who would send me, hey, did you think about this, hey, what about that, because they knew I was writing the book, and that too, I mean, it's all a group effort.
Yeah. And so you mentioned your editor telling you you had to cut 40,000 words, but there's something you probably have heard of it that people refer to as paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
Eventually, you just have to stop collecting data and you have to write. Because if you
Yeah.
collect data, you could do it for literally your whole life and
Yeah.
never get anything down. So for you, before it went to your publisher, for you, where did you reach that point where you just said, I've got to stop here and
Mm-hmm.
I've got to go with what I have?
I don't know that I did because I was editing that book up until, like, it came out in August. I was editing that book up until April. And then
Okay.
I think it wasn't until May that Bob Iger's like, oh, we're building in Abu Dhabi. And I'm like, wait, what? Wait, this has to go in the book. So he literally stopped the presses to get the Abu Dhabi information in there. But to answer your question as it is intended, um, again, because I'm one of those people that doesn't want, like, I want it to be right the first time. So I was pretty confident in my original kind of table of contents, and I knew the things I wanted to say. I think I'm thinking through the question as I'm answering it. I think I also just got so tired that I was like, okay, I literally don't
Yeah.
want to do anymore. Like, this is it. This is all I can do. But I have been a person in the past who, my first guidebook, the DFB Guide to Walt Disney World Dining, which I have on Disney Food Blog, the first iteration of that book was 900 pages because
Okay.
I was like, no, you have to know about this, and 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 I put it all in there. And eventually people were like, I don't want to read this much. Can you please just tell me what's really important?
Yeah.
So we had to cut it down. Um, but no, I don't think there was a situation where I was just like, all right, I have to stop. I think I got everything in there that I wanted to, but I did get very tired eventually. And I
Okay.
was just like, okay, this is going to have to be it because I don't think I need to sleep basically.
Okay.
So that's where we were.
Okay. Well, thank you. And so next we have about 20-ish minutes. And I have throughout our discussion, I've been jotting down some topics or some questions for those rapid questions that I emailed you about. So everybody knows I did not let AJ know what the questions would be. I typically do them during our conversation to kind of follow the interesting points. But before we get to those, is there anything else maybe I missed that you think is important to say about the blog, about the book, anything?
No, I don't really think so. This is obviously been extremely well researched and gave me a lot of opportunity to say, significant points that I haven't been able to say in other interviews. So I think that's great. So not really. I mean, I think it's just something that I think we're going to start seeing happen as a culture is the niching down of communities. I think
Hmm.
that we don't have a lot of wholly shared experiences anymore because everybody's in their own little corner of the internet right now, and I think we're going to see that niche down even more. So I think you are going to see, for lack of a better example, you're going to see, the Star Wars adults niching down into specific types of Star Wars
Hmm.
adults. You know what I mean? And you're going to see the Disney adults niching down into, this is the Gen Z group of Disney adults and the things that they particularly like and their characters and their nostalgia. So I think we're going to see that more and more often. So from the perspective of this class, that's something I keep an eye out for, is that things are going to niche down even more, and you're going to have even more micro celebrities in those spaces, which I think is fascinating to look at and watch. And so I'm eager to see how that works, and also how it is going to affect career opportunities
Hmm.
too. Um, anyway, like I said, digital media, volatile. You never know what's going to happen in 2 weeks or 6 months or what. Are we all going to be marrying our AI companions? I don't know. So I think this is a fascinating topic that's going to change drastically over the next 6 months and 12 months. And so I can't wait to see what you guys discover.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. So are you ready? There's like eight or nine that, and the way these work is you can explain if you want, you don't have to explain if you
Okay.
want. If you say something and don't explain and I want more explanation, I'll ask. So you can just name it or you can actually explain your answers, whatever you want.
All right.
And so I did about half and half from the blog and the book. So we'll start with the blog. So,
Okay.
putting you on the spot, what would you say is not necessarily your favorite, but you think the best food on a Disney property?
Unequivocally, the best food is probably Victoria and Albert's. I mean, that has objectively been rated the best food by people who are much smarter than me about gastronomy. But in terms of me, what am I going to go get when I'm on property? Um, it varies all the time because the chefs switch out, the products switch out. Sometimes they have to buy cheaper ingredients. And so the thing that used to be really good isn't good anymore. But pretty consistently, I can rely on places like Le Cellier. I can rely on places like Regal Eagle. Um, and there's several hotel restaurants that I will sort of consistently hit up, like, especially, I was at Boma the other night and like, this is still really good. Like, this continues
Hmm.
to be delicious. So I would say, stuff, things like that. If they're on sort of my consistently, this has been good for 15 years list, it's getting smaller and smaller, but it does still exist.
Okay. So then this next one is Disney snack. What is your favorite Disney snack, but also the one you think is, if it's different, what is the best Disney snack? Because they can be the same or they can be different.
I mean, so again, this changes so much right now. And if you'd asked me this 3 weeks ago, I would have said the carrot cake cookie in Hollywood Studios is my favorite because I am a big carrot cake fan. But right now, I am um in love with the salted caramel cupcake at Caramel Kusha in Germany.
Okay.
That's probably, if you told me I could only have one snack on Disney property, like, or on Disney World property, I should say, um, that's the one I would probably go get right now, which a lot of people don't like it. So I, I'm not gonna defend it, but I like it because it's almost like a brownie with salted caramel buttercream on top, which I love. So that's great. The best snack on property, um, the one that everybody should go get. I'm going to cheat and I'm going to say if there's an Epcot festival going on, go to the Epcot festival and find snacks there. I
Okay.
was just at Festival of Holidays this weekend, and even in the absolute pouring rain and garbage weather, that fondue in a bread bowl at the Bavaria Pavilion is still top notch. Like, I will go out in the rain for that. So I think if you can hit up a festival, and that's the case on Disneyland or Disney World, especially Disneyland, because their festivals are always, they hit it out of the park every single time. Um, but those are good places to go where you're going to try something new, you're going to try something interesting, there's something there for everybody. And That's what I would recommend.
Okay. Um, Another one on that one is, so now not necessarily food, not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to be the quality of the food, but what do you think is the best themed restaurant? Or what would you tell somebody who is wanting to go to a restaurant for a specific theme? And it doesn't have to be, with children, without children, whatever, but to kind of experience the theme and the ambiance of a restaurant. What would you tell people?
Yeah, I think Space 220 is kind of fun because it's unexpected and you can't even really visualize what it would be till you get there. I think Cinderella's Royal Table is extremely well done in terms of if you're going to theme to, big old castle. And also I think there's something extra special as a completionist. Eating in the castle, I think, is a requirement.
Okay.
Like, you haven't really been to Disney World until you've gone inside the castle. I'm one of those people that likes to, if I'm at a flea market, I go to every single stall.
Hmm.
So I need to be inside. So that I also really vibe with sci-fi dine-in. I think
Okay.
that's so fun. And I think when people walk in that restaurant, they're like, what? This is not what I expected. So I think sci-fi dine-in is probably, when I think themed restaurant, that's what I think of first usually. And I know it's not everybody's cup of tea. Not everybody even knows what a drive-in movie is, but I think that that is such a fun visual when you first walk into that dining room and just be like, what is going on in here? So I think that's
Okay.
a blast.
All right. So one more parks question. What is your favorite attraction if you had to pick one?
This is objectively the people mover.
Okay. All right.
There's really no other
Um,
answer.
I agree with that. I I really enjoy taking a long trip around Tomorrowland. So the next few are on the book.
Okay.
Um, and so writing the book, what area would you say you learned the most about through writing the book?
I would say I learned I learned a ton about addiction and about how subjective addiction is, that it's absolutely not a line drawn in stone. It is different for everybody, and it is based entirely on what you're capable of handling. Because for some people, going to Disney once a year is an addiction, and for some
Hmm.
people, going to Disney, there are some people who are going like every day, but for some people, it's hurting them enough from a financial and societal perspective, like relationship wise, to go once a year. That's enough, that it's hurting enough people that it can be called an addiction. So it really is based on how are you affecting yourself and the other people in your life, with the thing that you're doing. So that was very interesting to me. And I think that also takes a lot of the concept of stigma away from addiction,
Hmm.
because addiction can really is completely different for different people, and it completely is based on what you are capable of and how things affect you personally. So that was very, very interesting to learn about that. And also I did a lot of learning about the Walt Disney Company and what their how they make the decisions that they make and why they
Hmm.
make the decisions that they make. And I think a lot of Disney adults are um, kind of have blinders on in some respect to they want Disney to be a certain way. And so I guess they're feeling negative towards Disney because Disney's not doing a thing that they think is the right choice or makes sense. When really what Disney is dealing with, like their contextual understanding is so utterly different from what we as fans
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot there to unpack, and there's a lot there that Disney is doing an admirable job managing um under those circumstances. Like there's a lot going on that we don't know
Yeah.
about, and
Yeah.
we're making judgment calls on it, and it's like you don't even know, you don't even go here. So that's was really interesting to kind of figure out. You got to think about each person individually and what they're kind of going through before you start throwing stones.
Well, and that is an area that I've become much more interested in, like the kind of corporate strategy, the decision making of the company, as just a global entertainment company. And this last week, or a few days ago, I think, there was the rumor that before Netflix put in a bid to try to purchase WB, they actually thought about trying to purchase Disney. And then they kind of going down that path a little bit. They said, okay, we don't want to do this.
You're
And
like, never mind.
my first thought was, were they going to purchase Disney Plus? Were they just going to
Yeah,
purchase the streamer? Are they talking about they really wanted to purchase
it's
all of Disney? Because, that's the scope that we talk about in class, that Disney is still, it's lost a lot of money over the last 5 years, but it is still the largest media conglomerate in the world.
yeah.
However, if there's a company that is going to purchase Disney, it's going to be a company like Apple that, their profit, I mean, the worth of Disney pales in comparison to the worth of a tech company like Apple. So that was really, really interesting to me. And so that is an area I've gotten more interested in. So, sort of piggybacking off of that, did you identify an area that you wish you could cover more? If not in the book, like now you've kind of become more interested and you want to keep up with that, you possibly want to do more with that.
Yeah, I mean, I really do like kind of looking these mega media companies in the age of AI. What is that outcome going to look like? And I think that a lot of people are making judgment calls and decisions based on what we currently know, which is
Hmm.
actually probably about what you know is about 10 years past
Yeah.
where innovators are now, right? So it's very interesting to kind of look into how could AI affect our lives and how we're interacting as communities, as humans, and in these fandoms, right? And then also the interaction. It was fascinating the interaction between these brands like Disney and their fans, right? Now, the Disney fandom, the Disney brand fandom connection is a lot stronger than it is for a lot of other brands. Like, I don't know a
Hmm.
lot of Target fans who are like putting on the calendar the earnings call for Target,
Yeah.
right? Whereas a lot of Disney fans are listening to the earnings calls, right? So it's a very interesting relationship between Disney and its fans, and it's something that I think is just fascinating to watch and figure out how Disney has learned to interact with its fans, because less than 10 years ago, well, I shouldn't say that, 15 years ago, there was no two-way street
Yeah.
publicly
Yeah.
with fans, and now they've had to very quickly adopt and create policies and procedures around publicly interacting with fans. And it's like that's not easy to do. It's not easy to do, and to maintain your brand and your messaging and to make sure that, everything's approved by the
Yeah.
multiple, echelons of people that need to approve it. So in a world where creators and the internet space and the social media space is moving so quickly, Disney has done an excellent job moving their behemoth rear end around, smartly, really,
Yeah.
and managing the influencer culture. So that I just want to sit there and like stare at what happens next there. I
Yeah.
think the whole how Disney interacts with their fans and with influencers in general and influencer culture is an incredible case study.
Yeah. Having written the book, now that it's out, now that it's been read by many, many, many people, um, looking back, is there something you would have done differently? If you had the chance to do it again, you would do differently with the book.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
When I was reading the audiobook, which was the first time I read the book, you know, really straight through the finished copy. Um, I was like, I love this. I love this. I mean, I got everything in here I wanted to get in here. I said everything I thought was important to say. I think that it does kind of hit the right notes for multiple different audiences. Like different audiences can get different things out of it. It doesn't pander to anybody. It's not insipid. There's a lot of data and a lot of backing information in it. Like I am very, very, very proud of it. I think it ended up, I worked very hard on it, but it ended up being exactly what I wanted it to be. So far, nothing I would want to change.
Good, good. And it's an excellent book. The do you have a favorite experience from writing the book, whether it's like a topic, a story, or just kind of like something that when you think about writing the book that makes you smile the most?
No, because my wounds are still healing
Okay.
from writing the book. I think this book, like, I mean, I've been a writer all my life, but doing a project at this level and on this deadline, like on this, we wanted to get it out quickly because we knew this was a controversial
Yeah.
and in the headlines topic, and so we wanted to get it out quickly. This book was kind of every spare moment that I had. It didn't matter if I was like deathly ill, like hacking up a lung. I still had my
Yeah.
computer in the bed with me and I was still writing and editing. So it was one of those situations where it was I don't think I don't think people realize when you're running your own business, when you're an entrepreneur, when you're managing a bunch of people and you're doing a second entire job
Yeah.
of researching and doing interviews and writing a book of this level, then I mean, I no. there's nothing good yet. I'll let you know when I can start to laugh about some of those
Okay.
experiences. It was just a lot, man. It was a lot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm still real tired.
Well, then maybe this next question is unfair to ask, but is
Uh-oh.
there anything in the future? Uh,
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's 1,000%. I think that they're like the question you asked me about, okay, what do I want to dig deeper into? There's so much. And like I said, the way that fandoms are going to change and the way that communities are going to change and how people interact with one another online and digitally, I think that is absolutely fascinating. We were talking earlier about, being a curious person. That to me is like, going out and watching gorillas in the wild and be like, what's going to happen?
mhm.
So I do not have a choice but to be curious about that and to start forming ideas and theories and talking to people about that stuff. So I am hoping there'll be another book. I'm hoping there'll be a podcast, a bunch of new things coming out from our little media company, that kind of builds on this, but also builds on a bigger concepts as well. So
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, AJ, thank you for doing this. For people who have not gotten the book or don't follow you already, what's the best way for people to do so?
Yeah, you can find me on any platform, disneyfoodblog.com. Over on YouTube, it's DFB Guide. You can find the book, Disney Adults, anywhere that sells books. So Amazon, Books a Million, Barnes and Noble. If you want a signed copy, I can do that for you. You head over to dfbstore.com and we can get you a signed copy. It doesn't cost you any more than it would if you got it from Amazon. So yeah, there's you can find us just about anywhere you search for Disney Food Blog.
Okay, well, thank you so much for doing this. This was a lot of fun, and thanks for spending the time with us.
Thank
Bye.
you, Cody. And I will tell y'all that Cody had to deal with my schedule, which has been wild for the last couple of months, and he was very generous and kind that whole that whole
No, it
time.
was it was my pleasure. It's I've been looking forward to talking about this book for a very long time. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.